We're talking about the sitar today, 'cause it has more in common with the piano than you'd think, which we'll explore, but it's not as much a presentation as just a demo of what goes on here on this instrument. But I'll, just as a brief introduction, how I became acquainted with this rather old, 500-year-old Indian instrument, is I studied the sitar for a number of months in New Delhi, and I took it quite seriously because Indian music is absolutely fascinating because of its complexities in the rhythms, in the scales, tunings, everything. It's much more complicated than Stravinsky or anything, you know, and when you delve into it. The English were in India for 300 years and never really took much notice. How you can ignore such a beautiful art form for 300 years is beyond me, but it took the generation of the 60s really to start listening. They opened their ears. And you know the story of George Harrison, Ravi Shankar, and the Beatles and stuff. But yeah, so the Indian music was rediscovered in the 1960s in the West, and I'm a product of the 1960s in the West, so that tells the story. But I had very intense lessons in New Delhi for a long time, and then I learned all the 300 ragas around. I learned a whole number of them, and Indian rhythms. You know what they sound like. Dinigini naga, dinigini naga, dinigini naga naga, dinigini naga naga sound. I mean, you have to end up on beat 17. You know those little things they do. So I learned all that, and played the sitar for a number of years with passion, and learned more and more ragas. And then I discovered that you're on an island with that instrument. You can't play with anybody else because the way it's designed. Nobody else wants to play Indian music. So that was it. I just gave up. And so I haven't much touched it since then, and you'll probably can tell when I pick it up, I'm more rusty than the sitar itself. So. Yeah, but still, it's a fascinating instrument.
How old was it? How old is that one?
This one, most of the sitar dates back to it was built in 1977.
Okay.
But the gourd is probably built. This is the gourd. It's actually a pumpkin of some kind. That probably dates back to 1967 because they stack these gourds in the sitar workshop hot backyard, hundreds of them, and all of them, almost all of them crack, and the few that don't crack become sitars.
Oh.
Yeah, and
Can we do that with our soundboards, maybe?
We should. We have another one of these, which is called the tambura, which is used as a drone instrument. We have it at home. And what do you call it? Big
fat bum.
fat bum or something like that. Because the gourd, I kid you not, is almost twice this size. It's massive. It's called a bass tambura. I didn't bring it today, but it's used only for the drone. And that's the key thing about Indian music. They get their tunings and all the complexities because everything is built on one fundamental, on one tone. And in the West we call it the bourdon, I think, you might know, or modal music. But basically you take, this one is tuned to C sharp, but you could take a C and everything else is built upon that C. And that's why you can't play with any other instruments. Because nobody wants to play in C all the time. So the forms that I'd like to just demo that are of interest to a piano tuner are the bridge, which is a particular shape. There's another bridge underneath it. The tunable frets, movable frets, and the what's called the chikari strings, which are under here, and they sound like this. So that's a tuned, as piano tuners we call it a tuned duplex, or sympathetic strings. And they are never played, they just resonate, except at the beginning, but they just resonate along with the pitch of the piano.
So those sort of like aliquot.
Aliquot. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So then the most sitars have about 20 strings, give or take one or two. They have 7 playing strings, which are the big knobs there, and at the back, 7 playing strings, and then they have, say, 13 Chikari strings or aliquot strings that sit underneath. You probably can't see them, but they're sitting underneath. See, here's the playing strings, and the aliquot strings are sitting underneath it. They run right underneath the frets. Very clever design, based on a 2,000-year-old instrument called the Vina. So that's it. The smaller gourd at the top is actually made of wood, on this sitar. And it's there, not just to hold the sitar nice and straight when you put it down, but it's also, it amplifies the vibrations of the neck.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a listen.
It's sort of like a guitar designed by a committee. but by a city council. Yeah. Should we light some incense?
Me and George, we like incense. You know what I mean? And so the first thing you hear when you go to a classical, so you see, I'm out of practice here. I need to sort of shuffle along until I sit right. Ravi Shankar tells a story in his autobiography that he was sent off at age 4 or something ridiculous to his teacher, and the Indian model of guru's sannyasin, or teacher-student, is that you live with your teacher and you fetch the water and you cook the meals, and you're just basically a slave. And he, if you're lucky, he'll teach you something. And Ravi Shankar tells the story that his teacher made him sit like I am now with the sitar for a whole year before he was allowed to play one note. He spent the whole year sitting. And he says, you can imagine how keen I was to play my first note. Just sitting, yes. So then you will hear lots of sounds like this at the beginning of an Indian concert. I won't do it now, but you get tuning. The particular raga scale is in here. There are 13 notes, but Indian scales typically have maybe 70 or 80 notes. So you set your scale here with these sympathetic strings. This is in a minor key at the moment. And then you will move your frets to the same scale. So now the whole instrument is set up for a particular scale, or a raga as the Indians call it. And one day I asked my New Delhi teacher, I said, look, I'd really like to learn the raga Ridari or whatever it was called. And he looked at me, he said, we can't do that. I said, oh, okay, why not? Well, it's morning, I can teach you this afternoon because it's an afternoon raga. They have ragas for all seasons, the monsoon seasons, and every raga has its own personality and traits. And there's even a story which they'll tell you in hushed notes. There's a group of sitar players. They play the raga Kiwali. But one should never play the raga Kiwali because it causes things to burst into flame. It's fire. But they only know about this in East India. You hear about the people in East India, they say they only know about this in West India. Yeah. But so that's the personality of a raga, which is basically an expanded scale turned into a half-an-hour concert.
That looks fantastic.
So that's enough introduction.
Are they all steel strings?
Steel and bronze.
Oh, bronze.
Yeah, and they specify the second and third string of bronze and steel.
Do you know traditionally they were using, when they first started to build sitars, they would have been using a different material, I would assume, because rendering steel or bronze like that would have been, the strings would have been incredibly expensive.
And difficult. And I have some cheap Indian strings that I bought, from villages and things. And that's the strings they would have had. And they're all bronze, and they're not straight. And
Right.
Yeah. But now, of course, it's all industrial. You can buy. So you can. I'm tuning at the moment with the beat. Yeah, I'll do that again. Very elegant, very quick. So these strings here are only, you can, if I had a tabla here, I'm going and you could set up an atmosphere just doing this for a while. But now I'm still tuning, and so I'll just do a few more of these, and I'm going like this. And at the concert for Bangladesh, organised by George Harrison, with 100,000 people in a massive outdoor festival atmosphere, Ali Akbar Khan, I think it was, in his tabla player, they're doing this. The tabla goes dum dum, because the tabla is tuned as well, little drums. So he's tuning away, this guy's tuning away. And they stop and look at each other, and the audience bursts out in this massive applause. It was tuned. I thought that was the first raga. Yeah. Okay, so what have we got? You only play on one string. And that's this string. And you can bend like more, as much as
more than you can on guitar.
But I've not pulled it flat because it's a new string.
And so you're playing just behind the fret like you do on the guitar, but you've been playing a certain amount of pressure?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Play with it. So you just use it as a fretless guitar, or you just pull on the strings a lot. So this is my fundamental, and this is where you set up the raga. The tabla comes in, and now everybody's getting in the mood, you know. And one of the reasons you're getting in the mood is what we talked about yesterday, is pure intonation. Because we're having pure fifths, well, I've got it's not quite true, but we're having pure fifths, pure everything. There's not a single equal temperament note inside. And so the sitar player will set it up nice and slowly.
I can hear it sympathetically setting off the other strings, even as you're going.
Yeah, I'll do that again. You hear it kick in?
Yeah.
So this is my fifth, and I'm going to the 9 or 6. And if I do it right, there it is. If I do it wrong, you hear nothing. It's that accurate. I'll do a few more in a moment. So your sympathetic strings will only fire if you're spot on. So at the moment I've got a minor key. String go pew with the top. If I slightly move it, it's gone. Dead. And there it is. So that's why I was saying yesterday I'm not so sure about tunable duplex on pianos, because if it's not spot on, you're wasting your time. And now we're in the last part of the raga that gets you excited, and the drums it builds and builds. They build these ragas from very quiet to lively. Yeah. But so what makes these overtones? Well, you were talking about the buzz yesterday on the piano, and you're using the felt to mute the buzz of the A graph, and you could call it the zing. You know, musical string instruments have a bit of that zing. The Indians consider an instrument that doesn't have zing, they consider it dead. You hear a lot of this. Part of that is the aliquot strings, the sympathetic strings, but also on the main bridge. But how they do it is by shaping this bridge in a parabolic shape. And I've had to shape these bridges myself several times because they're made of bond, and the steel string cuts into the bond. So you lose your zing over time and the sitar goes dead. So as much as piano tuners we get rid of all the zinging and zanging, on the sitar you create it. And they have a name for it, they call it the os. And the os is this that you hear in Indian music. And some people, when they're not used to it, they say, oh, it's all ding, 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 you know. But you get used to it and you start to like it and appreciate it, to the point that on certain sitars and tamburas, they have a little silk thread, a little red silken thread that runs under the string, just to raise it a tiny bit more and to fine-tune the zing. So yeah, but these are parabolically shaped bridges that I've had to do myself, and they're pretty good. The reason they're parabolic, which is like that on this sitar, it means that the curve goes like that, like half a parabola on its side, if you like. The reason for that shape is, of course, that as you go up the neck, this angle changes, this angle here changes, and of course you would lose your thing at a certain point if you didn't shape this parabolically to meet the different angles. So the shape here responds to the different angle of the string. The sympathetic bridge here is also made of bone and is also parabolically shaped. So your sympathetic strings are also producing zing. In fact, everything on it does. So that's the bridge, and then we've talked about the sympathetic strings. So the last thing I want to show is the frets themselves. So I'm not quite getting on my minor. This is a minor second. There's your minor second, which is not used a lot in Western music. We normally go, you know, major second. The Indians love their minor second. Because it's nice to resolve it. It's like a fifth, you know, you can play with it and then, yeah. So that's the minor second. At the moment it's not tuned well, so what I was saying about the movable frets is I just can very quietly adjust it a little bit until I hear my, there it is, my sympathetic. My sympathetic minor second, and there it is. And I think I've covered the sitar. I'm not going to play because I can't anymore. But
We want a morning raga.
the morning, right? Yeah,
Just give us a wee bit.
that
A
was
little
the-
come on.
Oh,
Money
yeah.
into the come on. Move the clock forward.
There it is. That's it.
I thought it was still tuning.
That was just gorgeous.
Gorgeous.